All right, guys, welcome to lesson 6 for Algebra 2. We are now going to jump into inverses. So we are going to be working on 2 pages on this lesson, 19 and 21. Make sure that you pause and copy. All right, so let's copy this page down. All right, so basically, look, here's what's happening, guys. We're going to have a function, and inverses are just where the x and y switch spots. So when you look at these 2 tables, you'll see that all that's happened is on the 0.49, the inverse was 9.4. For the 0.60, the inverse was 0.6. So inverses are just switching the x and y positions. Whenever we are looking at notation, we will use -1 to denote an inverse. And so you'll see the -1 on the y as an exponent. And in function notation, which is the most common situation, is this guy right here, you'll see an f to the -1 of x. All right, so now we're still on page 19. Whoa, page 19 on the bottom half. It did not get my whole screen in here. It's a little frustrating. So if I can scroll this in. Nope. So, but I want to show you here what's happening. It'll be pretty easy to see. When you have a graph, we can list the points out, and that's what's right here. This is the graph, the red graph. And what I did is I inversed it. I just did the inverse, and I plotted those points on this graph. And you can see it becomes a sideways parabola. Part of my parabola didn't show up on the video. So, but that's the inverse. That's how you graph the inverse. It's one of the easiest ways. Just list out the points of your original, and then just flip the x and y's. Okay, now you're going to go on page 21. Now, how can you find the inverse algebraically? There are really 2 ways to do it. One of them is really hard to do on a video, and so we're going to do that one in Zoom. But this is the most common way. If you look things up on the internet, this is what you will see. So you've got your function right here. I'll highlight it in yellow. And there's really just 4 steps to this piece. What you do is you make your f of x the letter y, because it's easier to write if you just got a y there. Then, since we just learned a minute ago, x and y switch places for inverse. So what we do is we just put the x where the y was and the y where the x was. So that's where it says x equals 3y cubed plus 4. That was step 1. Step 2. That's where it'll switch. Now you need to solve the equation for y. You need to get y by itself. So we took 4 away from both sides. And then I divided by 3. And the last thing is, in order to get rid of a cube, you have to cube root. So I did a cube root on both sides. And so the left side's that real ugly looking guy, the cube root of x minus 4 over 3 equals y. The very last thing you do is you turn your y into the inverse notation. And so I'm going to use my highlighter again. And so that you can see that's the inverse notation right there. All right, and then it's the cube root of x minus 4 over 3. So now what we can do is we can check to see if this works. Like, is this actually an inverse? So what we're going to do is, I'm going to show you on the next slide. So you can pause and copy this down. What we're going to do is we're going to plug a value into this x on the normal function. And whatever the answer is, we're going to plug it into the inverse because it should go back and forth. Because remember, x and y switch spots. So I chose the number 2. So look, I plugged the number 2 into the x spot. And I solved it down and got 28. So since x and y switch for inverses, I'm plugging the 28 into the inverse. And I should get 2 back. And so 28 minus 4 is 24. Divided by 3 is 8. The cube root of 8 is 2. And I sure as heck did get my 2 back. And that just shows that they're inverses. It's a nice little way to check it. All right, so make sure you come to Zoom. This stuff does seem tricky the first go. I strongly encourage you to maybe even just type in how to find inverses of functions into YouTube and just watch some other videos, because they're just helpful to see it done a couple different times. It's not difficult. You just got to see it and do it. But I will also show you in Zoom a really neat way to do it that is some students really prefer to do. It's a little bit more work, but it works out well as well. Alrighty. So last bit, there are 3 things for you to work on for assignments. The ebook, the NAW inverse worksheet, that's graph and other pieces. Then we got the inverse graph slides, and you need to take quiz number 2. All right, guys, that is it. Take care. Stay safe.